Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Nationals who are stranded in some of these territories by UK parliamentarians who have criticized the UK's response as well. And we have to keep this conversation in the forefront because we are still in the hurricane season and anything can happen. Of course, the UK government will continue to defend their actions, and very seldom will any government actually man up and say, you know, we were wrong, or we didn't respond in time, or we could have done better, and we're going to ensure that we do better from here on. So we see the positions that they have taken on that. Dr. Steve McFeely, yesterday I was watching statement time in the UK Parliament, and Sir Alan Duncan, who made the first statement on Monday and then a further statement on Tuesday in this regard, and there were some very, very pointed questions that were presented to him. You may recall Henry Bellingham, who was a minister for the Overseas Territories, asked some really good questions. We saw some politics playing out in it as well, because those proponents of climate change are also using that as a platform to talk about what the UK is doing about climate change. Of course, because the whole Brexit situation is first and foremost on their agenda, issues like climate change have taken a back seat to all of those other discussions. So a lot of those MPs try to move that forward as well. We see what is so important also, Dr. McFeely, is that the British, Europeans in general, and I must say human nature is that you don't like to be criticized, you don't like to be embarrassed. And we see the UK's reaction as a result of persons like Josephine Gums Connor and Miss Hodge coming forward and criticizing the UK government for their lack of preparation. We see the foreign minister, Boris Johnson, visited some of the territories yesterday. We saw the King Wilhelm, I think his name is, or William, the Dutch visiting. We saw Emmanuel Macron visiting as well. We didn't see that here in the Cayman Islands, in other territories after Hurricane Ivan, after Hurricane Ike. But again, because people are openly challenging them and criticizing them, we're seeing reactions to it now.
Well, all right, I would go further and say I would go further than a lack of preparation. It's a lack of empathy with poor people. And as I have said on this show so many times, people do not care about poor people. Poor people do not have any value to people who are better off. And poor people now are understanding that in these disasters that are happening. You see, for instance, the French are a little different because they treat their territories a little different from the English. They have always during the colonial era. The French and the Dutch have treated their colonial people different from the British. Mm-hmm. You see, French citizens and Dutch citizens from the inception made their colonies, made their colonial people part of their great empire. They gave them citizenship. They never gave us any citizenship. They what we were called British subjects. You see, subjects of Britain. Mm-hmm. And so when you see it has to hit them very hard when you see the prime minister, the president of France going down to Saint Martin at the earliest inception, going there walking with the people, and that's far away from France, little Saint Martin, for himself to evaluate the destruction there, and to help the people and to guarantee the rebuilding of that place.
One of the questions that was posed to Sir Alan Duncan was whether or not the UK would consider, or why they didn't consider posting troops somewhere in the Caribbean on a permanent basis. Remember, at one time they had troops in Belize.
That's right.
That was mainly because of the
threat from Guatemala.
Right, the border of
Guatemala and Belize.
Conflict with Guatemala.
It had nothing to do with us.
And they pulled them out afterwards.
Yes.
Now, here was the answer that he gave to that. He says, the French territories are ruled directly from France because they have representation.
Yeah,
so they're completely different. The overseas territories, here's what he says now, the overseas territories are self-governing. And as a result of them being self-governing, we would need to, basically, they would need to, for us to request that we have troops stationed there. But when we look at our Constitution, isn't the United Kingdom responsible for internal affairs and
external and internal affairs
and defense as well? So what are they talking about? One minute we're left on our own, and the next minute we're not.
But that's not true.
Yeah.
That is a complete untrue. That is a complete misstatement. It's not. I would say it's a complete lie, because it's not true. Constitutionally, we are not a self-governing territory.
Exactly.
And the other thing about it is that why would they allow some few policemen from Cayman Islands to go down to British Virgin Islands when over 100 prisoners are escaping? You think they would have their troops on the ground?
Well, they do have. They had 40 Royal Marines.
Now they have them.
Well, they had them. They had them from the get-go. They had them on. They were on board the oh gosh, I forget the name of the vessel, but the auxiliary vessel that is there, they were on board there. They landed. What I discovered yesterday also was that they were unable to land any heavy equipment in Anguilla because the docks had been destroyed. So they had to use the helicopter only, and then they went on to the Virgin Islands from there. What also in his question, and it is so funny, not really funny, but it was it was ironic that some of the members of Parliament, because they were new members of Parliament, don't know the history of the UK's actions in the Caribbean. At one point in time, they had a vessel in the Caribbean year-round, and it was more than one vessel.
Yes.
They then reduced it to one vessel, and only during the height of the hurricane season, from July on, from July until November. That's basically. He didn't mention that because the criticism was there. The Mounts Bay is the name of the vessel.
Yes.
Now there's another one, the Ocean, that they have pulled from her duties in the Mediterranean. She had to stop in Gibraltar. It's going to take her 14 days, 2 weeks to get to the Caribbean. 2 weeks.
Meanwhile, people are starving, and people have no food, and people don't shelter.
Right. Now, mind you, they have had flights.
And as I say again, it's because they are poor.
Yep. And mind you, they have had flights, relief flights coming in, bringing materials and stuff. The other part is that they're getting criticism from their own British citizens, right? Well, first of all, they seem to still make a distinction between British citizens who reside in the UK and British citizens who are in overseas
reside outside the UK.
Yes, yeah. Because we are British citizens now, based
that's what
on,
that's what we're supposed to be.
Supposed to be, yeah, from 2000.
From 2012.
Yeah. That's where we were supposed to be as well. Now, the other issue in relation, the other issue in relation to this whole thing also is that Florida has been hit severely. The
Yes.
Keys, Houston, Texas area has been hit. There is going to be demand, huge demand for goods,
Building
things,
material.
building material and stuff. So
Yes.
they're going to be competing with Florida and Houston. Now, the U.S. is going to look out for themselves first and foremost. Remember, after Hurricane Ivan, the difficulty in getting generators
That's
out
right.
of
Florida.
right?
We have to
Because
go
they
to-
said we have to save, we have to
Yeah.
keep these because we have to deal with people within our jurisdiction. So again, that competing. Now, I heard the Alan Duncan also said that these transport planes that are leaving the UK are bringing, some building material as well. But these are all the things. The UK, the question was whether or not the UK was prepared. They were not prepared. They were late in their response. Even though the Mounts Bay was there, they should have evacuated people from those islands
Before
early.
the
Even if it was
hurricane hit.
even if it was their
Yes.
own citizens, the tourists that were there, they should have removed them. The assets that they had in the Caribbean were not sufficient. And we also find out that other than the storage, the supplies that they had on board the Mounts Bay, there was nothing else. The French and the Dutch had things stored on their island. Alan Duncan's response to that, if we had them stored on the island, then we ran the risk of them being destroyed in the hurricane. Well, it depends on what kind of structure you build.
Exactly.
If you put them in a
Yes.
bunker and stuff like that,
Exactly.
then those
Exactly.
things could happen. Folks, I want to remind you, you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host. My co-host in the studio, Dr. Steve Macfield, and Ms. Teresa Pitcairn has joined us too. We're going to take a commercial break. For the Record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve Macfield. At 8 o'clock after the news, we expect to have persons from government, I believe, hopefully the Honorable Minister. I'm not sure if he's going to be here. Ms. Jennifer Ahern, Mr. Joel Francis, not sure who is. I believe Ms. Jennifer is here already, and we'll know who will be accompanying her as well to talk about National Heroes Day. In the meantime, we're talking about the response to the aftermath of Hurricane Irma, the UK's response. I want to talk about Cayman's response as well. And first, we need to note that of all of the overseas territories, the Caribbean overseas territories, other than Bermuda, which is thousands of miles away, they are thousands of miles away, we in the Cayman Islands are the only ones who weren't affected by Hurricane Irma in terms of destruction. We therefore find ourselves in a position to assist. Now, I have spoken to people, I've heard people talk about the fact that after Hurricane Ivan, that we didn't get a whole lot of assistance from some of the overseas territories. We know, for instance, the Bermuda Regiment came and assisted us. I believe we had assistance from the Turks and Caicos Islands as well. I need to reconfirm that. But people are saying, BVI tried to take our business, registration of companies and stuff like that. Why should we be assisting them now? There are people in the Cayman Islands who need assistance. Why we should do it? I want to commend and applaud the Cayman Islands government for what they have done and what they will continue to do. We don't know what else will happen. We hear about the relocation of persons, the relocation of children who are unable to attend school, and we need to do what is humanly possible to assist our fellow human beings.
Not only fellow our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean.
Exactly. And the discussion can take place another day about government resources and whether or not we're doing enough to help our own locally. That's that discussion for another day and another time, because there are people who are in need, who do not have a roof over their head at this point in time, who are faced with the risk of possible diseases and whatnot after. What we find after hurricane is that the most vulnerable, children and elderly persons. So normally in the aftermath of a hurricane, a few weeks, a few months after, you see older people starting to pass on because of the stress and everything. Those are the things that happen. So I want to commend the Cayman Islands government for what they have done and what they will continue to do. I've seen a lot of photographs and stuff like that, and it seems as if in some instances the British press in particular, or the UK government, are more interested in photo ops than anything else. You see pictures of a Marine handing a local person a bottle of water. That's pure photo ops. But about the Cayman Islands response, I want to hear from both of you. We don't have a whole lot of time, but I want to hear from both of you.
I applaud the Cayman Islands government response, and I'm glad that that we are in a position to respond. Mm-hmm. I'm glad that we're in a position to respond, because had the hurricane been a little farther west, we would not have been in the position to respond. So I'm glad that we're in a position to respond, because they are brothers and sisters across the Caribbean. We have more in common with them than we have in the people up in Europe. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's commendable that the Premier and his government has gone down there, and they have doing the best they can. I am all for it, and I hope that we can have this dialogue, that they will bring us closer together in the Caribbean, and to understand that we all one people, and that these people up in Europe really don't care much for us, other than to say that we belong to them. Yeah.
And we've heard criticism about the acquisition of the helicopter. I believe we need more than one helicopter. Yes. We need two, probably a larger one. We've heard talk about Cayman Airways, and sometimes some new administrations coming in about doing away with Cayman Airways, privatizing it and stuff like that. Again, we're seeing the immense value that we have in Cayman Airways, and even if we have to subsidize it, we need to continue to do that, because that is ours. Ms. T, let's hear from you. Good morning.
Yeah, hi, morning. Well, I've been listening. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's on the Facebook, and people express their concerns and so on. But we are our brother's keeper, and I think this is one of the central principles that we're taught for those of us that say that we're Christians, and we do unto others the way we want them to do for us. We were just really fortunate this time around. I agree with you wholeheartedly on the subject of addressing our own internal concerns at another day. It could be one of our kids that's there that's suffering. Mm-hmm. It could be a member of our family that's there that's suffering. Mr. Macfield is right. We have to recognize that at some point in time, we are each other's keeper.
Yes. Now, how do we think that people would feel about having troops stationed in the Caribbean? Mainly for the purposes of being able to assist in the event of a disaster. The optics on that could be, well, you have troops there because you want to, in the event something happens, you're there to take military control. And I believe that there would be some apprehension in terms of the optics of that. But that is something that we could look at, that we could consider. But definitely, there are lessons to be learned again by the UK from Hurricane Irma, and they need really to do more now, and they're being pushed to do more. They're being pushed. The Conservatives are being pushed by their members, as well as we see Labour now coming on board as well. Because remember now that in Hurricane Ivan, I believe it was a Labour government that was in place. We didn't get a whole lot of assistance from them. Folks, we're going to our news at this point in time. When we return, we will be discussing National Heroes Day. So please stay tuned. Don't change that dial. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorrit Connor. My co-host in the studio with me, Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve Macfield. We will have the persons from the ministry, including the minister, to talk about National Heroes Day. That we will start at 8:30 as opposed to, as promised, after the news. So we will continue our conversation. I just want to make a correction. I believe I said earlier in the conversation that British citizenship was awarded to overseas territories in 2012. No, that was in 2002, not 2012, 2002. So that question still stands now, Ms. Teresa. I didn't get an opportunity, Ms. Teresa. I didn't get an opportunity to get your response in relation to the whole idea of having troops stationed somewhere in the Caribbean so that there could be a rapid response to emergencies.
Well, it's funny that you asked that question, only because I received a comment from one of our listeners who said that she has a son who applied to be in the British Navy and was told that the quota for persons coming from the Commonwealth Caribbean was actually full. And that led me to think, well, I thought that once we're British citizens, and there would be no differentiation between whether or not you came from Cayman or from the United Kingdom. And I say this in the context of whether or not it's possible for us to have our own troops in the Caribbean. Maybe they could be trained by persons in the United Kingdom or the U.S., but I don't see any harm in starting at home to trying to develop what is necessary for us. That's my view.
Now, let's look quickly at that message that you received from that person. When my understanding was that when we were offered British citizenship, to activate that, you applied for a British passport.
Mm-hmm.
If that individual who wanted to join the British Navy applied for a British passport, I don't think that there is supposed to be any distinction between a British citizen who resides in an overseas territory, has British overseas territory citizenship, but also has British citizenship. He's not considered a Commonwealth country, he's considered a British citizen. That person can go and reside in the UK, attend school in the UK without any limitation on the time that he may remain, do anything that any British citizen born in the UK of two British parents or whatever, even though we're finding out these days now that some persons who were born in the UK of British parents may not have British citizenship. We saw the rush now for permanent residence because of the Brexit situation. They're discovering that now. But a holder of a British passport who's also an overseas territory citizen is considered British for all intents and purposes. So I'm wondering whether or not that individual applied and indicated that he was British and say nothing more than the fact that I am British and present that British passport, as opposed to providing other documentation to them.
Well, you see, we don't even know what the question required. The questionnaire may well have required additional detail with respect to whether or not the person is not only British citizen, but also have British overseas status as well. I don't know the details, but this I thought was a very interesting question, and I think perhaps is warranted for some more review and research. And I said it, and it's just timely that the person sent that because, as I said, I see no reason why we can't start to think about developing our own troops. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean when I say our own troops just here in Cayman, but I mean right across the spectrum. Maybe we could do it with the communities that are from the overseas territories. Maybe we do it with all the English-speaking communities, whether or not they're independent or not. But I don't, because we're right here. You know, you can't really wait until others. I'll give you an example. My husband's dad's not well. My daughter is away in Europe, and she's only 2 hours away. Now, yes, we have access to the telephone, and we have access to the computers and so on. But getting there to deal with an emergency is just 2 hours for her. If my husband were to go, that's 10 hours, a day and a half. So I say that to put that in the context of what we have now. we should have something right here that's accessible, that's close to us, and where we understand each other and, share many of the same values. And this is not to say that when you have values that are inconsistent with others that it's necessarily a bad thing. But, we got to start somewhere in terms of developing our own dignity and self-esteem. And that's my personal view. I don't know how you and Dr. McField feel about that.
Well, just before Dr. McField comes in, the advice that we would want to give to the person who sent you that message is to check with the governor's office, have the governor's office look into the matter to get some answers as to why this person, this individual is considered to be a Commonwealth.
Why the application was not approved subject to the quota.
Yes, and why that person is subject to a quota if he is a British citizen. Yeah. Now, maybe there's some residency requirements. I'm not sure if the person is actually residing here in the Cayman Islands as opposed to residing in the UK. I don't see where that should be any material difference in terms of his ability.
Yeah. And like I said, we don't know what the questionnaire actually required.
Yes,
we don't know the details. But again, something worthy of review, I think, for us to really consider and extrapolate a little bit about it. Yeah,
Dr. McField?
Well, it seems to me that if what the caller is saying is factual, that the British defense system, the British defense system, Navy, Army, Air Force has a different recruiting regulations, and they have quotas on who can join and where they can join and where they can come from to be members of the forces, and that has nothing to do with citizenship in Britain and with immigration. It seems to me that's what it tells me. As far as forces, I don't understand why we haven't thought about this before, because we haven't thought about our own defense system before, because when a disaster comes, we have to depend on the police and the fire. And I mean, the police is not trained for all those things. The police is trained for detecting and preventing crime. They're not trained for the defense and all those other things that do. We've had home guards here from 1941 to 1945. We've had home guards. I know people who joined the home guards from then they were 16 and 17 years old, and they went on to become great people, great citizens. We also had Caymanians joining the British Navy and stationed in Trinidad in the Navy, and some of them are some of the greatest people. One of them that comes to mind is Mr. the late Harry McCoy, who was one of the most decorated men in the British Commonwealth. And so I don't see why we can't have at least 150 young men in another home guard system here that would respond to disasters like hurricanes and things like that, and we can afford it. And it's time that we started preparing ourselves for our future, for when we might have to go on our own. We can't sit and depend on whether troops going to come from Belize or from Bermuda to help us, and but that takes men who are interested in nation building, and I don't see too many of them now who have been elected.
Men or women.
Talking about nation building or know much about nation building.
Well, we spoke about some form of national service, and again, this is possible. Look at Bermuda. Bermuda has the Bermuda Regiment.
They do.
After Hurricane Ivan, they came here and assisted us in that regard. Now, there's some Bermudans who kicked up against the conscription into the Bermuda Regiment because it was mandatory. It was mandatory for them to serve there. But we need to seriously look at those things. We have to stop being dependent on other countries, and especially being dependent on the UK. One of the things that we're going to talk about, not on this show, but we want to talk about the whole Brexit situation and whether or not we're having sufficient oversight over that. I have just accessed a document on the House of Commons website, and we see some of the statements that were made in the testimony that was made by the leaders of the overseas territories to that committee that is dealing with Brexit. but we see, I read to you a recent question in relation to accessing European Union funding, infrastructural funding and stuff after Brexit, whether or not, and the question was raised if the overseas territories, those that do receive it, places like Anguilla, Turks and Caicos Islands,
Montserrat.
Montserrat that receive it, whether or not, if that falls away after Brexit, will the UK government pick up the slack, in relation to that? So, one of these days in the near future, we're going to discuss the whole Brexit issue, whether or not we have sufficient people on the ground in the UK, in our London office, or do we have other consultants and advisors who can advise us? One of the things, one previous administration got a huge, came in for a lot of criticism when we had Lord Blencathra as a representative in the UK, but that man had access to people. He knew people, he had access for information, and he could keep us up to speed with what's happening there. We now have to rely on the Friends of Cayman, the all-party group, and those MPs who have an interest in the overseas territories to ask questions on our behalf. And my question is that sufficient during the process of Brexit? And we don't want to find ourselves in the lurch after that. We see how we find ourselves in the lurch now when it comes to the issue of Cayman Islands passports and what we have to go through to do that as well. I'm told we have one caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to the Three Musketeers.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Revered Three Musketeers. The thing with us is we had a militia once. I'm pretty sure of that. It was formed by the man who came here with the British governor Sligo to read out the abolition of slavery document that we have, 1835 May. That was his purpose after Sligo left to form a militia, and he did stay for about 3 weeks, I believe. Then he came back again, Captain Pat, from the 81st Regiment. Jamaica has had a regiment for over 200 years and well-formed and a huge force from long before they became independent or anything. And they had plenty of people served in the Second World War in Great Britain as with the Army and the Air Force also. And we had Mr. Cavalier also, along with who you mentioned there, Dr. McField. He was served in the British Army in Africa. And also, I think Mr. Charles Whittaker served in Europe in the British Army. And there are others. Mr. Dalkeith Bond served in the Air Force. But when the Hurricane Hattie took place in 1961, it destroyed what was British Honduras, is now Belize, hammering them. And many of the school children in particular came over to Jamaica. And that was just before there were already the talk of going independent. That was 1961. And they put them up there. The school I went to, I remember we took in boarders. We had a boarding part of the school, Calabar, and also we had them there, and they stayed on. Many of the families came over and everything. People put them up in houses, and the government helped. So there was always that helping hand. And the British government, to my knowledge, always had in what is now Belize, have a regiment there, or a readiness force there. They have helicopters, they have a ship there or something, and a sort of an Air Force. They used to
they had that caller. Caller, I'm going to have to interrupt you, though, because I'm told that we have to go to a break now, but certainly welcome you to call back later on if possible. Please stay tuned For the Record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Oric Connor. My guests with me, my co-host with me this morning, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve McField, and we have one caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Oshie. Good morning, Ms. Teresa. Good morning, Dr. Steve McField.
Good morning.
A few months ago, I called this program, speaking about the same thing we're talking about right now, about a defense force in this country.
Mm-hmm.
All the young people that we have come out of school, they can't get a job, they be on the streets, get in trouble, they put them in prison. I think it's a disgrace. Take them, train them, and put them for a defense force in the Cayman Islands. Because we're going to need them. Mark my word, this world is getting difficult to understand. We're going to need them, and we're going to need them in a hurry. And not next year, but maybe in the next 2 or 3 years we might need them. But because how much people come here from other countries on boats and bring people in here to work 2 months, and then they pick them up and carry them back out of here. I know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So it's not hard to do it. What sense of spending all this pile of money on our kids in Northwood prison, get them a bad record? They come out of Northwood and they can't walk the streets before policemen pick them up again for crimes that they probably don't commit. Take them and train them. Get them training.
Yep.
A good defense force, and put them on boats and put them out there on the ocean and put them in training. And if you have a problem, they'll be the one we have to look for. You see what happened in Angola? That's what happened to us. Because we don't expect England to help us. Nah. They can't help their own selves sometimes. Anyway, gentlemen, have a good day later.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. One more caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Reese, and Dr. Steve.
Good morning, sir.
I got to say something here this morning that might upset you guys, okay? But I can't help it. How many times have I called the two radio stations and suggested the same thing you all debating and discussing this morning? Our young men and women should be sent to England, join some service over there, the Army, the Navy, the Coast Guard, or whatever, some uniform service, okay? And I think I heard something about it's hard to get into the service over there. Is that correct, Mr. Rita?
No, there was a question that was raised by a parent of a young man that applied to go into the service. And since we've had the conversation on the radio, the parent came back and said that initially there appeared to be a residency requirement, but she was told by Mr. Bush, or representative in the UK, that's not essential. So she's now going to try and clarify the situation to determine why the response from the UK office was that he didn't qualify because he was from a Commonwealth community.
That's not true. We are more than welcome in those services. I have a son that went to England. He took a train to Scotland to the recruitment area of the Army, the recruitment department, and signed himself in, joined the British Army, and but he spent 6 months in Afghanistan, okay? And he's a Caymanian. We are a British overseas citizen, territorial, whatever it is now, not territory no more. What you call it? Oh, see, help me here, because you very versed in this.
British Overseas Territory citizens.
Citizenship, correct. We are privileged to everything the Englishman has in England and the UK, and used to be, and Europe up till now, until Brexit comes through. I have suggested we take these young men, and what the old people say back in the days when they start smelling the piss, to send them over there. The government or some department here, some authority should get them all arranged to go over there into these services. Now, it's not happening. Now, the three of you, getting back to the three of you, three of you went overseas, came back here well educated, very articulated, and very experienced in what's happening throughout the world. I'm going to ask you now, have you ever recommended to our government or in a department about our people in Cayman what to do with them? I will hang up and listen to you. And you all have a good day.
Thank you very much, caller, for that. And my answer to that is we do that every day right here.
We do that every day, and if you look at my history, initially in 2002 with the Cadet Corps, and you'll see how I have been trying year after year to get that into a system where people could serve. And if you know, one of the principles idea for the Cadet Corps was that it would turn into a national service. And as far as I was concerned, as long as you go to a public school, we can't say about private schools, but as long as you were attending to a public school, it was compulsory that you have to have being a Cadet Corps, and there have to be a Cadet Corps system in the school system. That never materialized because it got taken away by other people who did not understand our history and our culture and what it was supposed to be before, and they took it in a different turn. And today it's still lingering. We spent a lot of money, but we haven't gotten any results from it.
Okay, we're going to take a commercial break now. When we return, I shall introduce the two guests that we have in the studio with us, and we will be talking about National Heroes Day. Don't change the dial. Put it on pause if you must, because For the Record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. And as promised, and I try to keep my word, as promised, we have in the studio with us the Honorable Dwayne Seymour, Minister responsible for Health, Environment, Culture, and Housing. And also with us is his Chief Officer, Miss Jennifer Ahern. We're going to be talking about nominations for Heroes Day, which will be sometime in January, but I won't give you all the details. I'll get them to do those, give you those details. But first of all, I want to say welcome to the Honorable Minister for being here. Congratulations on his appointment as a minister. First of all, his success in the elections and his appointment as a minister. And also good morning to Ms. Ahern. Good morning, Minister.
Thank you. And on the record, I want to say that this is my first time on the record.
Yes.
Thanks for having us, and Dr. Steve, Ms. T, all familiar persons to myself, and I like to hear you all in the morning, especially the historical perspective, which I think our country is dying for, starving for information in terms of this area. But I guess the reason why we're here this morning is as many don't know, don't care what genre is being awarded. The Ministry of Culture is the ministry that organizes every Heroes Day event, albeit Minister Juliana O'Connor Connolly is the Minister for Sports. And I think sometimes that's a bit of confusion. But definitely we take it and then hand it over to the respective ministry after the nominations, etc. And I've already heard people on the street coming up to me, even in church, talking about people that they're going to nominate. And, I just hope that people get out there and actually turn the forms in. But Heroes Day, which is scheduled to take place on January 22nd, 2018. And definitely it's a free event which takes place in Hero Square in Georgetown at 9 a.m., which is a public holiday. And the theme for 2018 National Heroes Day is sports. Some may have thought that sports probably the Heroes Day for sports probably took place a long time ago. Even me thought it was, but actually persons who are sports enthusiasts got awarded in other areas. And I was surprised that sports was not recognized as yet. But the definition that the committee took, which we have a very lively and large committee, was sports include all forms of competitive organized activities or games, either physical or mental, conducted through individual or group participation, whether amateur or professional. Sports is governed by a set of rules or customs which serve to ensure fair competition and allow consistent education of the winner. So this brought the question then is, should we include pelting? And I know, and I know Dr. Steve would probably no. Well, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Chief Officer. Bring some further comments.
Okay, thanks very much, Minister, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for having us on. So, as the Minister said, they've identified sports, and the main thing we want to talk about today is the public nomination period, which runs for the month of September. So we're actually halfway through already, almost. So time is kind of running out. But as we've been doing for the past few years, we're inviting members of the public to nominate people to be recognized on National Heroes Day. So the nominations that we're looking for are not for national heroes. What we're looking for are public nominations for people to be recognized in 5 different categories, 3 of which are pioneers, and then we have long service awards and memorial scroll. And as the Minister said, we have a nominating committee. So the Ministry of Culture is responsible for the nomination process. And then the team at the protocol office actually take over and organize the amazing event on the day. So please do mark your calendars for Monday, January 22nd to come out and be part of it. But right now, what we're really asking for people to do is to take a few minutes of their time and to make sure they submit some nominations for people that they think are deserving of recognition for their contributions to sports in the Cayman Islands.
Okay, and are there any criteria that is laid out in terms of the nomination process?
Sure, that there are, and we've got the nomination form that you can get online at our ministry website, which is www.ministryofhealth.gov.ky, or you can email us at NHD, which is National Heroes Day, short for National Heroes Day, at gov.ky. You can also pick up forms at the Government Administration Building here in Grand Cayman, or the District Administration Building in the Sister Islands. The categories that we have are early pioneer, which is somebody who's made a significant contribution to the development and delivery of sports in the Cayman Islands prior to 1960. Pioneer is somebody who's made a significant contribution between 1960 and 2006. And an emerging pioneer is somebody who's made a significant contribution in the last 10 years, so from 2007 to present. For those 3 categories, the person that's nominated can be alive or deceased. Okay. They can be Caymanian or non-Caymanian. But what you need to make sure you outline in the nomination is how they've contributed to the development or the delivery of sports in the Cayman Islands. So it's important that you remember the contribution has to be to our sports in some way, shape, or form. Those 3 categories are the individuals who will receive a commemorative insignia, which the awesome team at Government Information Services designs for us every year. Yep. And they'll also receive a certificate. And the other 2 categories are the memorial scroll. So for that one, it's somebody who's deceased, who's made a contribution. And the Long Service Award is someone who's currently alive, who has been a contributor for at least 10 years to sports. And the Long Service Award is the category where somebody who's made a contribution, but it might not necessarily have been a pioneering contribution, can be recognized. So, for example, somebody who has always picked up the kids from school and taken them to the football practice. They didn't do anything pioneering or extraordinary or innovative, but they've been key to making sure that the program was able to continue, that people were able to participate, and they've done it for 10 years or more. So that's the Long Service Award.
Is there a specific number placed on how many awards will be given?
Yes, there is. I don't know if Minister wants to speak to that or.
Yes, the number that's been placed is 75. I must admit, though, that caucus is very nervous about that number and is willing to make adjustments if needed.
They think it's too big, too high, or not high enough?
Probably not high enough.
Okay. Okay.
And you know politicians.
And that's just for the 3 pioneer categories.
Yes.
So the 75 is the total that we target for recognizing in the early pioneer, pioneer, and emerging pioneer. So those are the ones that are restricted. The Memorial Scroll and the Long Service Award, there's no limit on the number of people who can be recognized in those two categories.
Okay. Now, the minister did mention earlier about the fact that persons may have been nominated through other processes before and given other awards who may have been sports persons, but that does not deter or prevent someone from nominating that person again for this specific event and this specific award.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's certainly it's a different type of award than what they might have been recognized for previously. So,
and when we talk about persons who are non-Caymanian, that's such a touchy
yeah, that can be
nowadays.
controversial. Yeah.
and but I mean, if persons want to recognize a name like Mr. Winston Skinner,
yes,
or Mr. Spooner, or someone like that, those are the kind of persons that we're talking about. That contributed to the sports in Cayman.
And Millicent Blades, who actually introduced netball to, as I understand it, to the Cayman Islands. Our year was the first year in Cayman to do netball. Thanks very much for that, Mr.
And the thing about it is I mean, I'm graced to be not as old, but I never heard that name before.
You should have.
And I would like, for someone who knows the facts on this to nominate this person.
Even as I said, Edward Miller and Ernest from South Sound, who his surname escapes me right now, but they introduced Ernest Foster volleyball.
Oh, yeah.
And again, we in Bordentown, exactly. We were the first group to actually go to the U.S. to play volleyball. Alice May, myself,
yes.
Kathy, Larice. So I hope you got folks who got the history right. That's all I got to say about that. Yeah.
Well,
we need all the help we can get.
What usually happens in these instances is that you end up with a nomination, you have the awards, and then there's a lot of criticism after. Well, why wasn't this person nominated? Why didn't they choose that person? And I would like for you to impress upon people that the nominations need to come from the public. So it's extremely important for them to make those nominations. Now, I don't know if you have an oversight committee where if someone of prominence may have been missed, whether or not you have the flexibility to include that person on the list.
Well, I think what I would like to say, and I think you've heard me say it every year when we've been talking about the Heroes Day nominations, is please don't assume that someone else is going to make that nomination just because it's somebody who you think everybody knows, surely somebody is going to nominate them. Please don't make that assumption. Take a few minutes of your time. It's not going to take a lot of time to put that nomination in to make sure that that person's name gets put on the list for consideration by the committee. And unfortunately, it does happen almost every year when the nominations come in. We sit down and we look at the list and somebody around the table says, oh my gosh, I can't believe that Bob didn't get nominated. And it's like, and then you can see, and we have, as the minister said, we have a great committee this year, the nominating committee, and they're representatives from the districts as well as some of the sporting associations. And one of their roles is to make nominations as well as encourage nominations. But really, I do, and I thank you for bringing it up, I want to encourage members of the public, take the time to make that nomination, to make sure that the people who deserve this recognition get on the list.
And I know both Dr. Stephen and I would qualify for the runner as runners because every day I ran to school after my mother beat me for getting up too late to get to school. And Dr. Steve, you probably experienced the same thing too.
The person that comes to mind pre-1960 would be Timothy E. McField, Teacher McField, and Mr. Vernon Jackson, who's deceased. They would be the ones who started cricket, the modern cricket and Cayman Islands and football. And I would also think about a girl from a woman from Bordentown named Marina Dixon. In the sports, she won everything every year. She won all of the medals for women, from Bordentown. I don't know where she's still. I understand she migrated to Jamaica many years ago. And I would also think about the Tatum brothers from East End, from Gun Bay. They were the ones who were the long distance runners. And I would also think about Captain Ortis. I would think about Mr. Benson Ebanks on West Bay, Iwan Farrington, Iwan Hides, Jimmy Powell.
Well, we have several forms we have to give you then.
Yes.
and a gentleman named Hudson, and my own self, who was a fast bowler for Georgetown, and a gentleman who was my friend and my colleague who now lives in Tampa named Wybert Borden, Wacho they call him, Wybert Borden, who was also a fast bowler for Georgetown and played on the national team in those days. So there's a whole lot of people. But before I get a chance, if I can get a chance.
We're going to go to a commercial break now, and then when we come back, we'll give you that opportunity. I believe we have one caller on hold as well. Folks, we're going to go to Headline News now. When we return, the conversation will continue with the Honorable Dwayne Seymour, Minister responsible for Health, Environment, Culture, and Housing, and Miss Jennifer Ahern, who is the Chief Officer in the Ministry. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. It is my pleasure to have in the studio with me this morning the Honorable Dwayne Seymour, Minister responsible for Health, Environment, Culture, and Housing, as well as his Chief Officer, Ms. Jennifer Ahern. We're discussing the 2018 National Heroes Day Awards, which will take place on the 22nd of January 2018. Nominations for, and the category for this year will be sports. And the nominations are now open. Forms are available. You can access them on the government's website. The closing for nominations will be on the 30th of September 2017, and only those nominations that are received by that date will be considered. So we want to ensure that you get your nominations in early, and you can submit as many nomination forms as need be.
Yes.
Yeah.
We already have the photocopy going in there for Dr. Steve Maxfield for all of those that he's going to nominate as well. He knows so many of them, some posthumously.
And also don't forget Mr. T.
Yes, as well.
But I just wanted to say that this year when we sat down and spoke about National Heroes Day for sports, I was adamant that we didn't want to only recognize persons in the six-score sports in Grand Cayman, because I know some people say, well, what about this sport and what about that sport? And we really opened it up this year, especially sports like that weren't previously recognized, like flag football, which has a large following. Hundreds of people play flag football. So we really opened it up this year, and I just wanted to say that sailing and cycling were the first two sports that we attended in the Olympics. Yeah.
Craig, you listening?
Craig is on our committee.
Yes.
Committee.
Yeah. Actually, he has been very active, and for the cycling community, and as president of the Cycling Association, he has circulated the nomination forms as well. So
that's great. I'm hoping the other committee members are doing that too.
We have two callers. Let's go to the phone lines, if we may. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC.
Good morning, sir.
And good morning to your guest.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Honorable Dwayne Seymour, can you ask Jennifer Ahern what is happening to the telemedicine codes that was delivered to her by Mervyn Conley?
Thank you very much for that, caller. We'll have the ministers take a note of that. We're going to discuss National Heroes Day, and that will be taken care of, between the minister and his chief officers. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, gentlemen and ladies.
Good morning again, sir.
I would recognize for good morning, Mr. John,
Morning.
Minister,
All right.
and the lady there. Her name was, but good morning to all of you.
It's Jennifer.
There.
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend Mr. Leonard Hugh for football. I remember he took us from Georgetown Primary School. As we got a 13-0, he took us in, and we never been beaten since. We retired from school, came out of school, and formed a team called Saprissa. We hold the trophy for 5 years and retired with it. Mr. Leonard Hugh was our coach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller, for that. And I just want to remind people that you're calling in, but while notes are being taken, we need a nomination form.
Yeah,
we
that's
need
right.
someone, to submit a nomination form in that regard. If you have difficulty accessing the forms for those persons who may not have online access or a printer, be it in the Sister Islands or here in Grand Cayman, how can they obtain them, Ms. Jennifer? Otherwise,
We have hard copies of the forms available at the Government Administration Building here in Grand Cayman, and then at the District Administration Building in Cayman Brac. They can also call our ministry if they need us to get them a form. We had an insert in the paper last week as well, and if we need to get them to some other places, people can let us know, and we'd be happy to bring some forms.
okay. Before Dr. Marfield asks his question that I interrupted him earlier on, we have an offline query in relation to equestrian. We know that is a fairly new sport in the Cayman Islands. Some may say it is the sport of the wealthy, the well-to-do, just like how golf was at a point in time, no longer is. But whether or not persons who are involved in the equestrian sport would be considered as well.
And any persons involved in any sport in Cayman can be considered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Dominoes are not considered a sport.
Well, if someone nominates it and puts enough muster in.
Lord Graham, he likes to block
Graham,
Dominoes
yes.
games all the time. Dr. Macfield.
Yeah, I might not have this opportunity again to ask the questions but since we're nominating people, I would just like to ask the minister and his chief officer about two nominations, two possible nominations. One is the author of our national song, Miss Leela McTaggart Ross-Shire. Mm-hmm. Her family and people in the community like myself has been trying to get her nominated for an award for years and years and years, and we have been getting nowhere. I wrote a biography on behalf of the family several years ago at one of the for an award, and it was turned down, and we wonder why. I asked Minister McTaggart, the Minister of Finance, a couple of days on Monday, about the same award.
Mm-hmm. And let's note that was off air. That question
was off air.
Yes.
And I said to him, you were in a McTaggart and she was and you have to look up for your own too. Although people might say it's nepotism and stuff, but you have to look up for your own. Why is it that we tout the national song and we sing it every time every opportunity we get? Why is it that author has not been nominated for some award? Not only that, but she was a prolific musician, a writer, librarian, poet, songwriter, concert promoter. And why is it that she's not been recognized? And secondly, the great Captain Thomas Diaz. We say Thomas Diaz, but it's Thomas Diaz. He was a captain of the yacht that was owned by the Earl of Mountbatten, Prince Philip's grandfather, that it was built here and was sailed up to England in the 1930s with seven other Caymanians. When he got to England, the British Navy gave him open captain's license to sail on any ship that float any ship that float in the world. And they were taken to Buckingham Palace to meet the royal family, and they stayed at a place called the Victoria Home for the seamen, I think it was, and very little is known about him in the archives or in the history. There are only a few pictures of him with Prince Philip. When Prince Philip visited here certain times, he invited him to Galleon Beach and different places for dinner because Prince Philip knew what he had done for his father. And Joellen Thompson Smith.
Mm-hmm.
We have been trying to get as much information as on Captain Tom as possible, and she has just now got the passenger list of Captain Tom's returning from England in August 1938 with my grandfather, who was one of the men on board the ship with him.
Okay.
On the Lusitania, on the ship coming from Southampton to Jamaica. And why is it that great people like that, great heroes like that, great men, great feat, to carry a yacht? And by the way, I have the picture of the yacht that was built here. And why is Captain Tom not even mentioned in our history, our archives? Why is it that we're not doing this for our own people? Because it seems to me that you have to have nation building if you want to have your people have security in who they are and where they're going and where they came from. And those two great people, I think, have been neglected, and I would like to challenge the government to do something about it.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Steve. Before you answer that, Minister, we have one caller. We're going to take that caller before we go to a commercial break. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to the host, and good morning to Minister Seymour and Mr. Hearn. It's Johan Moxham.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Guys, just going to jump straight into it. First of all, I just want to encourage the selection committee or congratulate you guys for nominating or using sports as a platform. When you look at sports in the Cayman Islands, it is the one place where everybody's equal. Multiple generations of people interact with one another, and it seems like it's the only time when it really doesn't matter whether you're Caymanian or expatriate and so on and so forth. So I would hope that the theme and the message could be, which would help us going forward, to embrace the diversity, and this is proof that anybody that comes here is welcome. Those that are from here are welcome in the various sports, football, basketball, tennis, sailing, squash, whatever you want to call it, because we're at a time when Caymanians are disenfranchised, they are frustrated, and they need some sort of beacon to show them that, hey, we're building a new Cayman that includes everybody. We've always had a Cayman that includes everybody, and we need to focus in on all the things that work. When you look at Pee Wee football, when you look at Little League baseball, when you look at all the various sports around the country, it's just a mishmash and a kaleidoscope of every color, shape, and size. And I would hope that instead of having the usual politics that goes along with National Heroes Day, we'd be sensible and objective and honor all of those that have made their contributions. When you think of squash, you can't exclude Derek Tyler. When you think of tennis, there's multiple persons there. When you think of sailing, there's too many people, the Donald McLeans of this world, prominent Caymanians, Jerry Colonel, who represented us at the 76 Olympics and so on and so forth. But those people got their start from somewhere, and it was the diversity and the embracing of one another to get it done. When you look at football, you think of Astle Murphy, you think of Lenny Hugh, you think of Alan Moore, so on and so forth. Sports represents the thing that gives Cayman the best hope for the future, whereby it doesn't matter where you're from, what color you are, what size you are. It's as long as you're doing the thing properly and you believe in teamwork, we can figure this thing out. And I would hope that is the example that we use as a country, because we have to build a new Cayman.
Thank you very much.
And that only happens with the government and us sensible people acknowledging all the heroes and all the pioneers across the board. So I want to wish everybody the very best of luck, and to the nomination committee, which I'm quite sure it'll get really colorful.
And caller, we can anticipate that we're going to get several several nominations from you as well.
Yeah.
What on my list? What are you talking about?
Thank you very much for that. Caller, thank you very much. We have a caller on hold. We're going to take a commercial break. When we return, we're going to take that caller, and then we want to give the minister and his chief officer the rest of the time for wrap-up comments and everything as well. So what we're going to do is close off the phone lines after we take that last caller following this commercial break. So please stay tuned. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, the Honorable Dwayne Seymour, Minister responsible for Health, Environment, Culture, and Housing, Ms. Jennifer Ahern, Chief Officer, and we're discussing the 2008 National Heroes Day Awards, which will concentrate on sports in the Cayman Islands. We have one caller. As promised, we're going to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. O.C.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning to Mr. Reese, Dr. Steve Maxfield, the Honorable Dwayne Seymour, and Ms. Ahern.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
I trust that all of you are well and all your family members. Well, let me tell you, except for her family, Mrs. Leela Rothschild, I don't think many people on this island spent as many hours in her presence as I did. The only thing I didn't do at her library was sleep, because every holiday, and then even after I graduated from high school, I spent hours there with her. And I knew her personally, and I think it's a shame that she hasn't been recognized. And Captain Tom Diaz, as Dr. Steve says is the correct pronunciation, I knew him personally. It's not that I heard about him. I knew him personally. He was like a movie star. He was tall and handsome beyond, and he was a perfect gentleman. And I have that paper or a clipping cut out of a newspaper with Captain Tom Diaz, whichever you want to pronounce it, and Prince Philip. And Dr. Steve, did you ever get a copy of it?
Oh, I have a copy of it, yes. I have most of the stuff. Myself and Captain Brian has most of the material on Captain Diaz,
Because my mother's, a sister of my mother's lived in what they call the Rock Hole area, and his house and was not far away, and quite often I saw his wife, and he had a son and a daughter, and one went to England, I think, and the daughter went to U.S. So both of those people, Captain Tom Diaz and Mrs. Leela Rothschild, it's a shame that they have not been recognized. And I thank you very much, Mr. O.C., and God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Miss Georgette, for that.
Yes, thank you.
I want to give, we close off the lines now. I want to give both of you an opportunity for some closing comments. Ms. Jennifer, I know that you want to point out something in relation to Ms. Leela, as well. What was done may not be what we're advocating for now in terms of being declared a national hero, but I want to give you the first opportunity, and then, of course, the minister will get the last word.
Okay, thanks, O.C. Yeah, when we were discussing off air, I'm fairly sure, but I'd have to double check the records, that Miss Leela was recognized in the Heroes Day celebrations in 2014, which when we celebrated pioneers and cultural heritage. I seem to recall some discussion around her achievements and her contributions at the committee meeting, so I'm fairly sure she was on the list of recognition then. And I, as I was saying off the air, I don't say that to say that she shouldn't be recognized as a national hero, but just to say that I have a recollection that she was recognized through the Heroes Day process previously. In terms of our final comment, just to reiterate again, please take some time to submit the nominations. We've had some callers, we've had some discussion. There's no shortage of people who deserve to be recognized for the contributions that they have made to the area of sports in the Cayman Islands. We do need you to get those nominations in so that we can get those people's names on the list for the committee to review. The deadline is the 30th of September. And again, the forms are available for pickup in the Government Administration Building lobby here in Grand Cayman, or the District Administration Building in Cayman Brac. You can also get a form or fill out a form online at www.ministryofhealth.gov.ky, and you can email us at nhd@gov.ky. The nomination form is fairly straightforward, we think. It's a fantastic way for us to give some information. All the nomination forms go to the National Archives. So it's a fascinating discussion that happens when we get the nominations in, and it's an incredible learning experience for me every year. But please, please, please.
And no limitation on the number of nominations you can submit.
You can submit as many nominations as your fingers can type or your pen can write. There's no limit for the number of nominations that people can submit. But do take a few minutes to make sure that the people who've made that contribution, who've made the difference, get the name on the list, get the nomination in so they can be considered for recognition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hare. Honorable Minister.
Yeah, thank you, OC and Dr. Steve and Ms. Teresa for having us here today and the listeners of the Cayman Islands. I just want to remind persons that it's not just persons who are currently in sports, but there's the early pioneers prior to 1960, pioneer between 1960 and 2006, emerging pioneers from 2007 to present. I have sat in the chairs at the National Heroes Day and heard a lot of grumbling. So-and-so deserved it, didn't get it. Why so-and-so wasn't recognized? I want to say that you're the person who are going to nominate so-and-so. So the listeners, we're begging you to don't just sit by and think that someone's family member is going to do it, another friend's going to do it. Go ahead, even if it might be duplicate, but go ahead and do it. In fact, that may be a good thing.
Yes.
if one person got 10 nominations. So I want to encourage people to not just sit down and have nostalgic thoughts of who they remember back in the day, but to actually get out and participate in the process and actually attend the event on January 22nd, 2018.
And for both of you as well, the nomination form, it is really not a complicated form. You're not asking for a whole lot of details like the date of birth of the person or the place of birth or, anything of that nature. Not too many, personal details that you're requiring on it. So it's really, not a stressful form to fill out.
Yes, it's pretty simple. And, just the name, maybe you may have to call the family member to get the correct name or something like that. You'll probably know a nickname. You can use that also, whether they're alive or deceased, what category you want to nominate them in, if there's a district, and for how many years they did the service. It's a pretty simple form, and we're encouraged by the committee that we have, very lively committee, and We want you all to put so much nominations in that it poses a problem for the government. We have to reconsider our thoughts in terms of amounts. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. I just want to add to Dr. Steve's comments in relation to Ms. Leela, and just to say that, a person who has composed a song that has become the national song, we sing that, we play that along with the national anthem. One isn't played without the other. Mm-hmm. And while I am convinced now that in my lifetime we won't see the Cayman Islands becoming fully independent, at least politically, and I was hoping for that, but we're not getting a whole lot of push, when it comes to people advocating for that. That in any independent country becoming independent, a song like that would definitely, we wouldn't have to go out there and ask someone to compose a national anthem for us. That would be, and that will be, our national anthem. Like I said, it may not happen in my lifetime, but when it does, that it would be so. Again, it shows the importance of our, I know, we're not talking about national heroes, at this point in time. But we want to continue to hammer that home until it happens. Minister?
Yeah, I just want to say that as a Caymanian, I'm embarrassed that Miss Leela Ross and Captain Diaz has not gotten more recognition. Where I saw first the name Thomas Diaz on a wall at Mango Tree.
Yes, Alan Moore.
And I took the time to read up on this, and I'm like, this guy is interesting, and just shows you. I mean, we're not sharing. I mean, in my 40s, I'm learning about Captain Thomas Diaz. That should never be. And we need to do a better job in primary schools and otherwise, trying to get information out so that we have a greater appreciation for our forefathers.
Yeah. And you know what's so ironic about that painting that you saw there?
Yeah.
It was painted by Dave Smith's son. Dave Smith now lives on the property that was Captain Tom's because Captain Tom helped to raise Dave Smith along with Roy Dias.
Okay.
Captain Tom raised Dave Smith. So you have Dave and his wife, and she used to call in quite frequently. Unfortunately, the family, Miss Lynn is her name, and unfortunately, the family just experienced a tragedy with their son losing their son again. But that was that mural was painted by him. I think he went over to Cuba. He did some studying in Cuba as well in terms of art, and that was done there as well.
Oh. And by the way, Captain Tom had one son named Casson Lee Diaz,
yes,
who went to England, and he never came back to Cayman. He only came to Jamaica in the Caribbean. He died, and he was very prominent in Wales and left all his letters and memoirs and papers to archives there. And we are trying to get them back here. We're trying to get copies of them here. And since you're the minister now, I am going to lean on you now for some assistance to help us to do that, because it's very important that we recognize our people and our children and our grandchildren know where they came from and the contribution our people made. We have some great people. They were just two of the great people that we have. We have some great people here. And sometimes when I tell the stories of the people to other people who are not Caymanians, they are amazed that we could have produced such great people from such a small population of people.
Dr. McPhee, someone wants you to repeat the name of the person. Diaz, Casson Lee, I think you said.
Casson Lee Diaz.
Casson. Yeah.
Casson Lee Diaz died in Wales. Left all his papers and letters and his papers to the archives in Wales, and we're having a hard time trying to get them back. I think we either have to try to get it through the government or go there to get them or to get copies, and and we're trying to get as much memorabilia for Captain Tom Diaz from the archives in Greenwich, the Maritime Archive in Greenwich, but it means having to go there to do the research to get it.
And I'm going to steal some time, a little extra time here. I want you to tell us the story. I think Awawa, Miss Alverni gave us a story as well in terms of the circumstances under which he left the Cayman Islands.
Captain Lee, Captain Tom was a strict disciplinarian and a very astute man. Mm-hmm. And when his son was about 16 years old, going on not even 17 yet, Awawa from Rockall was passing Captain Tom's house, going out into the waterfront, what they call out in the bay to Mrs. Bryan's place. And young breadfruit had dropping off the tree, and it was ripe, young ripe breadfruit. And Captain Lee took the young breadfruit and pelted it. You were the one pelted before, and pelted at Awawa and hit her in the back. And Miss Olive, Captain Tom's wife, told Captain Tom when he came home what Captain Lee had done to Awawa, and he tied him up and beat him with a piece of rope to discipline him because that was a bad thing to do, to hit a young lady with a breadfruit in back. And Captain Lee, after the beating that day, they went down to the waterfront because the British Marine ship was in recruiting men for the merchant marine, and Captain Lee came home and packed his bags And when his mother asked him what he was doing, he says that he was going he was joining the Marine, the Marines, the Marine, and he said, you better wait till your father came home. And Captain Tom's had a ground then out where the Cornell home center is now.
Right.
And Captain Lim said, well, he this is the last the last time he saw me was when he beat me. He will never see me again. And he went and joined the Merchant Marines. At 16 years old, he never came back to Cayman.
Kept that promise. Yeah.
He promised he would never come back to Cayman and speak to his father again. And he only came to Jamaica to meet his mother. His mother had to go to Jamaica to meet him. He never came back because of that.
Those are the stories you'll hear for the record.
What were the circumstances, and I'm not saying that it's good to hit a woman or anything, but what were the circumstances that led to him?
No, children just being mischievous.
The young breadfruits on the prom, that was a thing to do, to throw them.
Yeah.
And as a result of that episode, I think Captain Tom Diaz had I would say, what would they call it, epiphany, and he joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church and became a great elder there. And when he died, he was a great member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Okay.
And by the way,
somebody's saying it was a breadfruit pot as opposed to a breadfruit pot.
And the Captain Tom sextant, the sextant he used to in those days to take the ship up to England is now owned by Mr. Ezra Miller's father, Captain Nate Miller. Mm-hmm. And by the way, my grandfather sent me to Captain Tom Diaz to learn navigation, because in those days be a captain was the highest thing that a black man could get, the highest office a black man could get, be a captain. And there was a whole lot of us there, and Nathaniel, Ned Solomon, and all of these people, and one day my grandfather had a what they call a provision ground, and was taking his cane down to Shirley McField's shop to sell, and he saw Captain Tom Diaz there, and he says to Captain Tom Diaz, "How's my grandson doing?" So Captain Tom told my grandfather Lemmy, he says, "I'll tell you, Lemmy," he says, "your grandson is not doing too well." He says he needs a profession that he can talk to make a living. Because he says, after 6 months, I gave him their first examination, and my grandfather had bought all these books about navigation for me and gave them to me, spent all that money. And he said, I gave him the first examination to take their ship from Georgetown into Negril and then into Kingston Harbor. And your grandson wound up in Germany.
I think, Minister, you wanted to say something before.
My grandfather never spoke to me for 6 months, even though I was on the same catboat with him going fishing. In the morning, I would be rowing the boat out in North. He never spoke to me for 6 months.
I just wanted to ask if Captain Diaz took the ship up before his son had left with the
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Minister, I want to thank you very much for being here. I want to thank Ms. Jennifer as well. And your portfolio includes many subjects you spoke about before. So the welcome mat is open for you to come in anytime you want to talk about all of those important subjects like health and the environment. We're talking about culture now, and of course housing, will play an important role in the Cayman Islands as well. So I want to thank you. I want to thank our audience for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension For the Record, into your homes, into your vehicles, as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. We're seeing that being done in the case of the Cayman Islands now, where we're extending that helping hand to our brothers and sisters in the Eastern Caribbean as well. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. John Sterling, Dwayne Banks at 12 noon for Talk Today. And as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three beautiful, wonderful Cayman Islands.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.